Hi everyone, welcome to Career Diaries, our new look at some of the journeys which the players and staff here at Cheltenham Town have taken throughout their careers to get to this point here at the John O'Rourke Stadium with us now at Cheltenham Town. Our first interview is going to be with one of our longest serving players and a very popular member of the Cheltenham Town squad, Mr. Will Boyle. Start then, of course, with growing up in West Yorkshire, where you are right now during lockdown. You joined Huddersfield Town at 15 years old, but were there other clubs you were involved with before you moved to Huddersfield?
Yeah, I started out at 6 years old, 5 or 6 years old, at my local club, Rothwell Town. The first professional club I was involved with were Bradford City. That was around, I think I was about 10. I was signed with their School of Excellence for a couple of seasons. But around here, it's quite big up north, really. Schoolboy football is quite big, where the best players from the schools in Leeds, Leeds Schools FA, becomes quite big. That starts at under 11s. So I joined that, and I was playing for both Leeds Schoolboys and Bradford Saturday, Sunday. But then Bradford tried to stop me playing on the Saturday. They thought I were doing too much. I decided to stay with Leeds Schoolboys and play Sunday League football again. Did that, and then got scouted again by Sheffield Wednesday, so joined their academy at 13. Had a couple of seasons there. Well, joined there, sorry, at about 12. Had a couple of seasons there and then got released at 13 or 14. Went back to Sunday football before going to Huddersfield at 15.
Yeah, I know. I've spoken to John Finnegan before about Leeds City Boys, and I know that he was a part of that before he ended up going to Nottingham Forest when he was a bit older. How
Yeah.
did you find life in the youth system at Huddersfield?
I really enjoyed it, to be honest. As soon as I joined straight away, it was about October, way through the under 15s. Loved all the lads straight away. The coaches were brilliant. My scholarship, I signed a 2-year scholarship. Really enjoyed that. I had a great coaches in Frankie Bunn, Tony Cars, and Mark Lillis, who I learned a lot. I learned so much in that 2 years, looking back, and I loved every minute. I think that was the biggest part, that I loved it straight away as soon as we did it, the competitive side of it and everything like that. We did quite well as a youth team, winning a few leagues, etc. And then moving up into the under-23s, Frankie moved up as well as a coach, so that worked quite well for me. We had a good relationship, and then joining in with the under-23s and being a professional, so it were really enjoyable and a good upbringing, a good grounding in the game, I think.
Yeah, you made your first team debut against Reading in February 2019 as a teenager coming off the bench in the Championship. Do you have any sort of inkling that you were getting close to having that first team opportunity? I know you played in a testimonial game, I think, in pre-season.
Yeah, I'd been involved in pre-season, went away in pre-season. I thought I did okay, but then it's tough to be involved week in, week out. That was actually the first time I was ever on the bench. And there were a couple of other lads who had been on the bench who were a couple of years older than me, a bit more senior, in a similar position, being on the bench for probably 4 or 5 games. I'd got on the bench for that one game. I guess it's fate, really, thinking about it. We were winning 3-0, and I think the story goes, Chris Powell turned around to Steve Eyre, who was his first team coach, who used to be the 21s coach, and said almost it were a gimme, really. Which one should I put on? Just a token gesture sub. And I think I got the nod. And from what I've heard through them people is that I got the nod because of my attitude, really, rather than ability. It was, he's got a great attitude. The lad's like, he's a great lad, sort of thing. So go on, get yourself on, and then obviously I can always look back on that. Whatever happens, hopefully in my career, I'll be able to play at a similar level again. But I can always look back and say, yeah, I played in the Championship. Although I probably didn't. I don't think I touched the ball in that game. But I can always. My coach Frankie always said that to me. You can always say it, and it's something that stuck with me.
I think the manager you worked with the most, first team wise, at Huddersfield was David Wagner. Of course, now managing Schalke in the Bundesliga. Of course, the man also got Huddersfield into the Premier League. How did you find him? Because I know he had a very good reputation there, especially with what he achieved getting them up into the top flight.
Yeah, I was on in with the 23s again. That was maybe a year or two after I'd made my debut. back in and around the first team and with the 23s. And then David Wagner came in, overhauled the club immediately, changed almost everything, changed the training times to free. You were training every day at 3:00 to align your body with obviously playing at 3:00 on a Saturday. The whole structure of training were changed. The attention to detail went to a new level. And obviously he's from a different culture, so he brought a lot of new things to the club, which were unheard of really from a lot of lads in the change room. Listening to the senior pros at the time who'd had 15, 20 years in the game, some in the Premier League and Championship for most of their career, they were almost completely surprised and overawed by all the changes that he made. But for me, obviously a young professional, very wide-eyed, I was just loving it really, completely new ideas and everything like that. Learned a lot off him. I ended up going out on loan. After he first came in, I ended up going out on loan to York in League Two. Then Huddersfield recalled me and I was involved with the first team throughout for about 2 or 3 months and training every day with them, and he'd moved me into the first team squad and everything like that. So that was a great experience again, seeing it all up close and personal, all the meetings, the video analysis, etc. That was a great experience. I played one more time for Huddersfield under Wagner at Preston. Before then, I ended up going back out on loan to York again for the remainder of the season. But for the small amount of time that I was with him, really, and spent as part of his squad, was, albeit obviously not a major part, but as a young lad, it was a massive learning curve and an experience that I'll remember and hopefully take bits from for the rest of my career.
If we rewind the clock a little bit, then you know your first loan spell was actually to Kidderminster Harriers in the National League. How did you find that? Because I think you only played in 2 games, but they're 2 very different experiences. One was a home game against Bristol Rovers with a crowd of 4,500, and the other was an away game at Welling United in front of 500 people. So it kind of reflects the contrast of the National League as a division, really. Yeah,
obviously that was my first taste of senior football properly. I think that was after I'd made my debut, although that were a 5-minute experience. So apart from pre-season, I'd never been involved in any senior football. That was a massive 2 weeks really in my development. The first time I went down and lived in Kidderminster for a month or so. Actually 3 weeks, I think, but played in them 2 games. Played at left back for the first time I'd ever played at left back in all of my career, really. The junior football, academy football, never played there. So then I made my senior debut against Bristol Rovers the year they got promoted, and then the atmosphere were nothing like. We were only 4,500, but they made quite a lot of noise, to be fair, Bristol Rovers, and they were on a bit of a push. It was over the bank holiday weekend. I remember it being a lovely sunny day, and they brought and quite a lot of fans and made quite a lot of noise. So that were a good introduction to senior football, really. And then you talk about Welling, a complete contrast where there were no one there and we got pumped 3-0. So yeah, interesting.
The start of the following season, you went on loan again to the National League to Macclesfield. John Askey, of course, now the Port Vale manager, was the manager who brought you in then. But as far as I'm aware, no minutes on the pitch. You know, what was the reason for that? And were you surprised you didn't get any game time considering you'd been signed on loan?
Yeah, I'm still asking myself that question now. What were the reason for that? So yeah, I signed on loan. It was probably the assistant manager who took me in, really, Effie Sodji. Obviously played at Huddersfield and had links to Huddersfield. He'd seen me play a few times, so he took me in there. I was there for a full month and didn't manage to make an appearance at all, which, without slagging anyone off, I was a bit frustrated, obviously, and disappointed about. So it was supposed to be to January, but the loan got cut short as it didn't seem to be working for both parties. So that was disappointing from a playing point of view, but now looking back on it again, it was another massive learning experience. Having to deal with the adversity, really, of not getting in a squad, not being able to show a manager what I can do, not getting an opportunity, having to deal with them frustrations at a young age and at the start of my career was something that obviously helped me build a little bit of resilience, I think.
Yeah, and you mentioned earlier you had the 2 loan spells at York in the 2015-16 campaign. It was a difficult campaign for York. Of course, they were eventually relegated from League Two. And Scott Flinders, of course, was a teammate of yours in that York team as well. How do you find life with York then? Because it was the start of what was actually a pretty disappointing 2 years for them, getting back-to-back relegations.
Yeah, it was a strange time for the club, really. I think in that season there might have been, I'd probably guess, between 50 and 60 players that played for the club, which is, it might even be more actually, which is really unbelievable numbers. It was still the time where you could go on loan out of the window. So they were just bringing in loan. I think at one stage we might have had 7 or 8 loan players. So they were like 2 or 3 missing out of the squad, just loans every single week. There wasn't much continuity within the team. It was a difficult period really for everyone at the club, players, staff, everyone. And it was my first real taste of senior football where I'd been with a squad for a certain amount of time. I think in the end I might have played only about 12 games or so. But being in and around it, training every day and then preparing for a game on a Saturday, that was my first experience. So it was, again, another massive learning experience in a tough situation.
First half of the 2016-17 season, another loan spell. This time north of the border, you went to Kilmarnock in the Scottish Premiership. How did you find life in the Scottish top flight?
Yeah, I enjoyed the experience, to be honest. Obviously, a decent level of football, and that was good because I managed to join Kilmarnock before the end of the summer. So I went and joined them from the start of pre-season. So I had managed to get a full pre-season with them rather than joining like at the start of the season or anything. That was good. I was in and out of the team, but I really enjoyed the experience. Only one downside I'd say to it really was the plastic pitch. Obviously play on 3G up there. There's a few clubs in the top division that have that, and then lower down it's quite more prevalent. So that wouldn't have been a massive problem for me, apart from I got a injury on my heel. I got a bit of bone bruising on my heel, and I think the pitch didn't help at all really. I think it'd have been maybe a 3-4 week injury if the pitch was a grass pitch. But training on the AstroTurf every day just aggravated it even more. So dealing with that injury for about 5 or 6 months really, never really got rid of it. And that definitely, I think, without making excuses, affected my performance, but also affected my time there and my enjoyment of it, because it was, thinking back to it, there were quite a lot of pain playing, which ain't always ideal really. So yeah.
When you look at the SPL from the outside, it's again another fascinating league. You've got clubs as small as Hamilton Academical, and then you've got clubs as big as Celtic, one of the biggest clubs in European football. You played against both Celtic and Rangers when you were playing for Kilmarnock. Is it all Celtic and Rangers up there, did you find?
No, there is, like, talk about the divide and the size differences between the club. You've gone from one extreme to the other, Hamilton and Celtic. But in between, you've got Celtic and Rangers. Then you've got clubs such as Hearts and Hibernian and Aberdeen, who are also like decent sized football clubs, and they have decent sides as well, decent teams. So there is 5 or 6 teams who are decent sized football clubs then. And then it's strange because you drop down, and then there's clubs with fan bases that are similar to National League and below, comparing it to English football. So it's definitely not just a two club league. I think there is other competitive teams in the league, but it'll be some task for them to overturn the superiority that Celtic have. But my dad was a Celtic fan, and he brought me up as a bit of a Celtic fan. So playing against Celtic were a massive achievement for us both, and I think that made him proud that day. So unfortunately, I was on the bench at Celtic Park, which was a little bit of a disappointment, really. But you can't pick and choose, can you, when you're in the team or not? So I got to play against them at home anyway, so that was good.
And now we move finally on to how you eventually ended up at Cheltenham Town. January 2017, coming in midway through the season. How did that move come about? Because Huddersfield to Cheltenham, I know you get all sorts of different sort of ways that players end up at clubs, but Huddersfield to Cheltenham doesn't seem the most normal of routes in many ways.
No, Kilmarnock wanted to extend my loan until the end of the season, but Huddersfield were really good with me, to be honest, and I'd had a little bit of a taste of senior football now, and I wanted to really go and establish myself and kickstart my career, really. I couldn't see that. I didn't see really a pathway at Huddersfield at the time. I couldn't see that happening in the too distant future. So I wanted to kickstart my career somewhere else and get involved with a first team and a club that I could then again call my own rather than a loan. So in the January, I was looking for a permanent club. Huddersfield said they'd let me go for nothing. They understood my position and everything like that. So Cheltenham were one of a few clubs who were interested, and then ended up coming down here. Liked the feel for the place, like the feel I got from the manager. And then Cheltenham got done quite early, really. I think I signed early January.
And obviously, you said you were keen to get senior football, and of course you weren't to know what was to happen in the future. But just a few months later, Huddersfield, of course, gained promotion to the Premier League. Were you not tempted to stay and be part of that kind of setup?
They were obviously going well in the Championship at the time. I wasn't a part of that in any way, shape or form, because I'd been at Kilmarnock for the previous 6 months. So it was never something I felt a part of. Obviously, it's a club that looked like they could have the potential to go into the Premier League, although at the time it was probably a pipe dream. So it's not something I wanted to hang on to and be associated to a Premier League club or whatever. I just wanted to kickstart my own career at whatever level that may have been. I wanted to get going and play men's football week in, week out and improve as a player. So I wasn't really too bothered with what was going on there.
You were brought into Cheltenham not to be a young player to be developed, but a young player to play games straight away and to make an impact. Did you feel like in a team that only just finished a couple of places above the drop zone at the end of your first season, that you had a lot of responsibility on your shoulders straight away?
Yeah, I probably did feel that, to be fair. But it's something that I quite enjoyed, the responsibility of it. I obviously made mistakes along the way. But I think that, again, I've spoke a lot about learning opportunities and valuable experiences that I've had. But I think that was right up there with one of them. Coming in, I think we were second bottom when we came in. The gaffer, I remember Gary Johnson setting up a league table for the second half of the table after the January transfers had come in. And I think if I'm right in thinking, we'd have finished about 11th or 12th in the second half of the season. So that was a very valuable experience for me. I think we went at one stage four clean sheets on the run. We were close to we got beat at Doncaster 2-0. I got sent off. But if we'd have kept a clean sheet for, I think, a half or something, we might have broke the record for the Football League at Cheltenham, which at that time in a team that was struggling was quite a nice achievement, really. I did feel responsibility. There were obviously big characters in the dressing room. But I played a lot of games that second half of the season and enjoyed the challenge of staying up. Obviously, there were a lot at stake, and looking back, I probably didn't understand the severity of what could have happened if the club had been relegated. I obviously understood the pressure of it and didn't want to get relegated. I just signed for 18 months and didn't want to be a National League player. No offence at all, but that was something that I enjoyed the challenge of and enjoyed the outcome in the end.
Yeah, you're often described as a mature person on young shoulders. You've had loan moves. You've lived away during those loan moves. Has that made you mature, or is it just the football environment that's made you quite a mature individual?
That's a good question, really. I'm not really sure, to be honest, as to what. I think that's definitely played a part. I think life experiences, obviously, you learn from them and you reflect on things. And I think I'm quite a reflective person, which I think probably helps me to view things in a certain way. I think one thing I definitely am is inquisitive about near enough everything, which I think is probably one of, without giving myself too much of a pat on the back, is probably one of my best qualities, to be fair, as a person and a footballer, really. So that definitely helps. But I think probably life experience, and I'm probably just been like this since I was younger, really. And I look a bit older than I am as well. So yeah, I fit the bill, really.
The 2017-18 season, there was a slight improvement, I think, in terms of very slight improvement in terms of the final finish this season. You obviously had Mo Issa scored a huge amount of goals that season. Some other talented individuals like Harry Powell, Carl Winchester, Joe Morrell, who's obviously doing very well, a bit further up and with the Wales squad now. Was just getting one more point from the previous season with that group of players disappointing? Do you feel like you could have done more looking back now?
Yeah, I think so, definitely. I think we had a lot of individual talent in the team, and I think if we were probably in an environment with a bit of a different structure, or a few things happened a bit differently, then we could definitely have had a much better season than we did. Play the lads who were play here at the time still saying the same thing. To be fair, they can't figure it out as to why we didn't have a bit of a push, or definitely achieve more than we did that season. So yeah, I think that is something looking back that we could have potentially achieved a bit more than we did.
The 2018-19 season, of course, there was the early change of management. Gary Johnson left, Michael Duff came in the September. What was that like to deal with as a group very early on? Because you do your pre-season, you set out for the season, and suddenly, wham, it feels like everything's been ripped up within weeks.
Yeah, we're obviously quite early in the season, but we hadn't started well at all. So it was a little bit of a shock, but the performances from the players weren't good enough. There's no doubt about that. And then as a player and as a group of players, you've just got to deal with whatever happens. And then obviously Russ took over for a little bit, did a great job. I think we won 2 in 4, it might have been, maybe. And then the gaffer came in after that. So you've just got to roll with it as a player, and obviously you're not privy to any decisions or anything like that, and you've just got to, whatever card you get dealt, you've got to play your best hand. So it was obviously a new experience for me, the first time I'd been involved with a first team where a new manager's coming in, so another learning experience.
Of course, then there was eventually the much spoken about change to the 3-5-2 formation. Quite often in football, because obviously it's so intense, there's games every Saturday, Tuesday, and there's a huge amount of focus put on getting the points in those games. Does it, you're obviously now being coached how to play in that formation and have been for a while. Does coaching sometimes go out the window a little bit, individual coaching perhaps, whereas perhaps it's more focused on a team thing and getting results as opposed to focusing on you as an individual and how you improve you as a player? Do you tend to find that happens sometimes in senior football?
Yeah, I think there's definitely a difference in development football, younger age groups, 18s, 23s, because it's, at the end of the day, it's a different outcome that's needed. Senior football, you need to win games, so it's a complete focus on the group. And then in development, it's about individuals and bettering them as players. I think as a player, you've got to keep an awareness that you still need to develop yourself as a player as well. And I think then it becomes, in senior football, you've got to take more ownership for your own career and analyse your own game more, really, because the manager, obviously, he develops players within the structure, but you've got to recognise yourself as well, what you can do to improve within that, to then hopefully give the manager a better player to play on a Saturday. So I think it becomes more of a, when you're moving to senior football, it's more of a joint thing rather than it being a complete dictatorship by the coach. You've got to take a bit more ownership, really.
You've still got a long way to go in your career, but obviously you're currently studying for a business degree away from football. You've just completed your A4B coaching badge. Do you have any idea yet on what you'd like to consider doing after you finish playing in many years to come?
No, I obviously get asked that quite a lot, because there's been a bit made about me doing the degree and the coaching badges and things like that. But it's more, I started it all out of a sense of curiosity, really. And now as I'm going along with it, I'm starting to be interested a little bit more in the business side of football. I managed to get on a course during everything that's happening at the minute with the coronavirus through the PFA again on the the marketing and management side of football. So that's been quite interesting again, looking at the financial side and the corporate side of football a bit more. So it's just stuff that interests me really around the whole game. But really, I think it's a part of plan A really for me I think anything that I can do away from the pitch that can help me become a better person and understand the game a bit more with regards to the coaching, then it'll hopefully implement into my game and help me become a better player and a more rounded, better player, which at the minute is my sole aim really.
Have you always been driven as a person to do more, or is it something that's happened in a football career that, has happened, once you became a player, you discovered this new things you could do alongside training and playing matches?
Yeah, well, I can't really put my finger on a trigger, but at school I was never really academically great, or I didn't have the commitment that I had with my football in the school environment. It was never something I had when I was younger. And it's probably more come around as I've matured a bit more, probably 19, 20, I started to think about things a bit more, I'd say, probably. And then I started to realise the opportunities that I got with the time that we've got and everything like that. And now as I've learned more and more and seen bits and bats, it's just snowballed really. And whatever I can do to help my personal development, I'm always looking for opportunities to do that.
Some final questions to finish then. Who would you say is the best player you've played with?
Best player I played with, I'd say Philip Billing at Bournemouth now. I played with him at Huddersfield. We're in the same youth team together, and he's definitely the most complete player I've played with.
Who is the best player you've played against?
I always struggle with this one, to be honest. I'd say I won't class it as playing against him, but you could tell in pre-season from playing against Jamie Vardy in the pre-season friendly the level that he's at, and I can imagine in a Premier League game he wouldn't be enjoyable to play against. But because he won a competitive game, I'd probably say Moussa Dembele at Celtic. He's obviously quite well known, and I think Chelsea were looking at him over the summer, so he's got quite a good calibre. So I did well against him that day though, so probably Dembele at the minute though.
What is the biggest achievement you'd say in your career so far?
I'd say probably my professional debut. Not for Huddersfield, my full professional debut for York. I'd say playing in the Football League, making my first Football League start, I'd say is probably my biggest achievement so far.
What would you say is the biggest regret in your career so far?
Reflecting on it, I don't really have that many regrets, although I'd say probably at the start of the season, I think over the summer, I probably didn't give myself enough time off and maybe worked myself a bit physically too hard. And on reflection, I think that's what caused my injury at the start of the season, which is a little bit of a regret, really, that I could have potentially done, or probably done a little bit less and worked a bit smarter. And then I could have been hopefully a bigger part. Well, you never know what can happen, do you? But we might not have been up there, but been a bigger part of this season on the pitch. So, yeah.
And what is your favourite game you've played in so far?
Probably against Celtic, being a Celtic fan growing up, and my dad being a massive Celtic fan. That were probably my favourite game so far, playing against them.
Boyle, it's been fantastic finding out a bit more about your career story so far. So many exciting more seasons to come, I'm sure, in a Cheltenham shirt and whatever other clubs you end up being with. Thanks very much for your time.
Thank you, Richard. Hopefully the greatest moment of my career anyway so far will be to come. Hopefully at the end of this season, that would be ideal, but let's wait and see.